Hi, I'm Elizabeth Carroll,
And I'm Ilsa Norman.
and we're here to talk about this week's episode of Marriage Boot Camp. This week's episode was all about the notion of psychological integration. And psychological integration means taking the past that is unconscious and bringing it into the present so that you can make decisions or choices about how you want that to affect your life.
Right. And integration can be a really intense process because you're talking about the things that are so deep inside of you that you probably really don't like. You probably loathe when you choose to be an escapist. You're escaping those things.
Exactly.
And to integrate that, to have compassion on those parts of you because of traumatic things that have happened in your life can be really intense.
Well, especially when you've worked the reason that they're unconscious is that you have actively put them down. You have suppressed them for so long that they become repressed versus just suppressed.
Right.
And so here we are, scraping the scabs off of everybody's wounds and asking them to engage with those very things that they've tried to avoid their entire lives since when the wound took place.
Right. So probably the most dramatic response to this whole exercise was Ink.
Yes.
And he just did not like going to those places that he didn't like about himself, right?
Exactly. In fact, he has this whole idea that if he just hides behind his awesomeness, that he doesn't have to face the things that he's worked very, very hard to move away from. I mean, we found out about the 12-year-old girlfriend.
Right.
So we understand that he has some very deep wounding around trust. But this stuff happened earlier than 12 years old.
Right.
From a psychological perspective, this happened much earlier than 12 years old.
Right. And I remember a little bit of his story that he went from a really, really rough neighborhood and actually came out of that, learned to survive, created a very successful tattoo business, and he has kind of adopted this philosophy of just positive manifesting of life, which can be really great in a lot of ways.
Right.
He's created a lot of success for himself, but as far as growth and change and being a better human in relationships, it can work against him.
Right. And I mean, he keeps his heart hidden because that's where all the pain is. And he says that his awesomeness and his positivity and all of that is a wonderful navigating style for life. But frankly, what we're seeing is superficiality, control, anger that's just below the surface.
Right.
And all it takes is just a little something to get him going.
Right. And then poor Sarah is just wears her heart on her sleeve and everything and is just so hurt that Ink cannot recognize and apologize for the things that he's done to hurt her. And it's just not a recipe for a good relationship, period.
Mm-mm. So the next couple we need to talk about is Benzino and Althea. And with Benzino, he experienced so much trauma in his young life that what he did with it was he shoved it down so that he never had to address it. And that was the way that he managed his rage. Unfortunately, the slightest little thing that sets him off taps into that well of rage and bam, off he goes. And the things that he hates most are the fact that he didn't go to his mother's funeral, that he was angry all the time. And I think that his navigating style of avoidance, and then blowing is absolutely not what we want from him. We want him to integrate the pain that he lived through.
Yes.
To grieve it fully.
Yes, absolutely.
And then come out the other side a different person.
Right. He needs to heal and process why he has been so angry.
Yes.
What has happened that has made him feel somewhat unsafe, that he needs to lash out and protect himself in this way. Yeah, avoidance is your quintessential recipe for random blow-ups. And we see that in their relationship.
Yep. What do you think about Althea?
Althea, this episode I think was quite a breakthrough for her.
I think so
She
too.
did not, throughout the whole season, it was hard for her to talk about what she didn't like about herself. But she did. She went there, she talked about her walls, and then to see her break down and crying, I mean, she's very hurt by Benzino's anger. And so I was really proud of her for going there because I think it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think that the child parts of Althea have never been taken care of.
No.
Talk about Sean and Catherine.
They were the surprise couple this week, I feel like.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that Catherine has a child self structure that is in so much pain, and she just, from her dad leaving the family and her mom kind of pushing her dad out of the family, and her never feeling loved or beautiful or any of those things, has carried over into her adult life as being insecure around women and a hair trigger temper. Because what happens is those vulnerable feelings get covered over very quickly in many people to a stronger emotion, which is rage and anger versus hurt and fear.
Right. So I think with Sean, in contrast to Catherine, I really adore and respect Sean a lot, but I do feel like he has a bit of pressure from his cultural background to uphold a certain image, which really stopped us from helping them fully.
Right.
And so that whole integration of those parts of himself that he doesn't like, that he doesn't want other people to see, manifest in these closet arguments. And even the failure of his business, I mean, I'm glad he was able to speak about that, but I do feel like there was a lot of work we didn't get to do, partly because it was on television. And just that integration of the parts you don't like of yourself was really hard for him.
Yeah, and in integration, if you aren't in pain, you rarely ever go to this place because it's just not something that's much fun. It's very, very hard work.
Yeah.
And so integration is something that people who are in pain accept as the next logical step in their journey. For Sean and Catherine, they're not there yet. They're still newlyweds. They're still happy and bacheloring and all that kind of stuff. So it was hard to pull them into it, but they did do some of that work.
Yeah.
I think Catherine was more open to the work than Sean was.
Yeah. Sugar Bear and Mama June.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. I mean, and both of them were really willing to do the hard work of integration, but I don't know that they really grasped how deep they needed to go.
Right.
I don't think that Mama June went as deep as she needed to go, but her issues of integration are not being safe as a child and now being a controlling adult who accepts as normal not having her needs taken very seriously.
Right. And she lets these kind of arguably shady characters into her life that she finds normal as a result of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. As opposed to recognizing where she hasn't been taken care of as a child and then rejecting those things as unhealthy.
And what that would require is for her to recognize that she wasn't taken care of and then deeply grieving that. I mean, you have to get into the felt sense of how abandoned and neglected you were in order to do this work.
Right. And what you don't see on the show is that we actually take time to, well, we hit the punching bag, which is part of that grieving, but we also kind of punch a pillow and just have alone time. Each of the cast members do to grieve what has happened, which is a lot of times just the beginning of the full integration process. I guess with Sugar Bear too, he has had just a deep sense of loneliness from his childhood, which may or may not resulted in some kind of a sexual addiction that he's dealing with, and that makes him do things that make Mama June not trust him.
Yeah, and it's not about stopping being bad.
Right.
I'm going to stop cheating. No, it's about digging deep, healing from that wound of loneliness, healing from the deep void that was left from his childhood, in order to then fill it with the right things. Fill it with genuine love, genuine self-esteem, maybe a spiritual foundation, but just saying white knuckling it through life never works for an addict.
No, and unfortunately, I think that's kind of what Mama June is pushing him to do.
Exactly. To
truly change, she keeps saying, and I'm just not sure she's ready to walk the real road of addiction recovery with Sugar Bear.
And Sugar Bear isn't either. So for Sunday and Cedric, I mean, starting with Cedric, what I find in Cedric is that he did not have that stable family community thing. He grew up really rough, kind of like what Benzino did. Got, gang-infested neighborhoods and that kind of thing that left him feeling unsafe, got him in trouble. And now, I mean, as opposed to Benzino, who just blows sky high, Cedric controls. And he's got this very structured philosophical foundation that keeps him stable.
Right. And I think Sunday has felt the manifestation of his control and has not liked it.
Well, he doesn't share his true heart, the vulnerable heart. He shares, the warrior and the king and, a lot of that kind of talk. And it's good because it makes him a very moral man.
Right.
and a very conscientious man, but it doesn't make him a juicy, vulnerable, open-hearted kind of man that Sunday is really attracted to.
Wanting, yeah. And then, of course, Sunday has had the biggest breakthrough probably that we've seen, at least on the television show side. We
Right.
see this kind of thing constantly in our nonprofit side, people struggling with abuse and whatnot. But she went there. She didn't want to with Cedric. She felt embarrassed or shamed or something, but she chose to go there with Cedric, which I think, even though they're divorced, shows the hope
Yes.
she has for the relationship.
Well, and here's what's interesting, and I think that her insight was spot on when she was in the confessional.
Right.
What happens for someone who has been abused in that way is that they shut down so many of their operating systems that they end up with a heart that is unable to fully love.
Right.
And she nailed it. I mean, she
Yeah.
had the sufficient insight to be able to say, I've never been able to fully love. So, she's been able to love her children, which is a phenomena that is separate and apart from adult romantic love. But she recognizes, I don't have that feeling of love because I'm so cold-hearted based on having to protect how I feel.
Yeah, and based on having to protect those kinds of abuses to ever happen again,
Right.
no matter what.
Right.
And so I think that this work, whether or not it's with Cedric, will prove just amazing for her future relationships.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in hearing more from us about relationships and dynamics of community and those kinds of things, check us out at mbcmotherdaughterduo.com. You can also connect with me on Twitter. I'm at mbcelizabeth.
And I am at Ilsa Abigail.
Thanks for watching.